Sort of continuing on where we were as we ended the first session about grace. Something that really threw me for a while was recognizing the difference between leadership and ministry. And I'm acknowledging I'm developing a thought that I originally read from a guy called Ian Jagelman. You've ever heard of Ian Jagelman? Wrote a great book. I encourage you to read it, where he develops this whole idea that leadership and ministry are not necessarily the same thing, and we often get confused. And I certainly did. So where does this thought fit into the continuum of today? Is, okay, we talked about grace recognition, thriving. But we can have good people in the wrong place, and that's all that's wrong. They're just a good person, but we placed them wrong. We didn't recognize their grace, and really we're forcing them to write with their left hand when they're right-handed. And they'll always take, if you write with your left hand, or if you're left-handed, but it'll take you twice as long and you'll still do a lousy job. Yeah? Why? Not because you're not a good person, but because I'm pushing you to use your left hand. I've pushed you outside of your grace. See, the thing about being the senior guy is, wow, in my orchard, I get to recognize and release. That's my responsibility. So, and certainly for a while, I would not be good at recognizing the difference between leadership and ministry. What does that look like? If somebody was good at their ministry, I promoted them to be the leader over it. It ain't necessarily so. They need to be just left where they are because that's their lane, that's their zone. And so I'd look for a great life group leader and I'd promote them to being an area leader, and I actually unplugged them out of their primary grace. And I expected them to act like a leader, and they floundered. They didn't like it because I was confusing that anybody that's good at the ministry is automatically going to be a good leader. And this is something we need to sort of get right. Leadership is a grace. Now, this might jar a few of you, but anyway, just hear me out. I'm just flying this kite idea that among all the different graces is the grace of leadership, and not everybody has it. Not everybody is graced to be a leader. And what Jagelman does in his book is tease out these two thoughts, that leadership builds churches, but ministry builds people. Yeah? Leadership builds churches, but ministry builds people. And so some people, their primary gifting is towards leadership, not so good with people. Great with strategies, forward planning. You know, they can immediately see and work with high levels of complexity. They can do that in their sleep, but you know, not so good at the areas of ministry. Then you've got people who are great at their ministry but not leading it, and then you've got people who are ambidextrous. They can actually flip from one to the other. And some of you are in this room. But then the challenge for those sorts of people that can flip easily from leadership to ministry is, what is the most appropriate at this point of time? If somebody's just, you know, had a tragic death in their family and you're sitting there, they don't need leadership, they need ministry. Don't be a leader, be a minister in that moment. And so, you know, it's also knowing what's the most appropriate, you know, at any given time. Does it make sense? And so often leadership is taking place. See, you might think that I'm exercising leadership now. I'm not. I'm exercising ministry. Leadership is actually taking place in the back room in front of whiteboards and charts and organizational level. So often, as soon as somebody steps on the platform, got the microphone, this is all ministry. all right? But the leadership has provided the platform for the ministry to take place. That's what's happening, all right? So leadership has actually provided a structure in which ministry can thrive. That's the success of a good leader. Not that they've hogged the microphone necessarily, but they've provided a platform, a structure that releases ministry to happen. That's a good leader, okay? So often I'd get sort of caught between the two. As I say, I'd be promoting people into leadership, and to do that, I'd take them out of their ministry. But here's the thing about a leader. They can lead anything. They can lead anything. Why? Because provided you don't want them to pick up an instrument and minister, they can lead the music department. They can organise the rosters, make sure the equipment's work, provide a structure for practices, They can do all that. Donna Crouch, Hillsong. I've watched her move from one leadership role to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. How can she do that? Because she's a leader. She understands leadership. So, but she didn't have to do it. She didn't necessarily have to do it. She was just the person organising the structure, the platform for ministry to take place. Are you with me? And so just recognising that in people. Now you might say, well, what on earth is leadership development about then? We're developing leaders. Well, what you're really doing. See, I could write with my left hand if you trained me and if I pushed myself to it, but it'd always be more difficult than when I'm writing with my right hand. So sure, you can take anybody, put them through your leadership program, but at the end of the day, they're writing with their left hand, all right? You give that same training to somebody whose grace is leadership and off they go. It's just, you're polishing a rough diamond. They are a diamond, they just need the training, and you're bringing out of them what's already in them. That's really, but I give the same training to a block of granite. Here's a rough diamond, here's a bit of granite. Same training, they're still a very polished block of granite at the end of the day. Now we need to be brave enough to realise, now when your church is small, of course, we're not expecting people to say, it's not my grace to give out communion. It's not my grace to, take up the offering. That's just all nonsense, all right? We're not saying that. But as the church grows, we can be more grace-specific as we go along. Mark tells the story of when he was first starting his church from just this little embryo, how somebody came up to him and said, Pastor Mark, the keyboard player actually smokes. And because the church was so small, he said, you mean during the service or after? Because, that's where we're at. It's like, gee, later on I've got the luxury to get specific, but provided they're not smoking out the back there and they're waiting till later, then I'm going with that. All right. So, of course, those sorts of things happen. And so you can move leaders around, but you can't move ministers around. Why? Because that's their grace. That's their lane. And we're meant to recognize that, leave them there, give them all the training and everything like that, and realize that that's the primary thing. Joel Trelaw, who some of you know, when I first arrived, he was serving in children's church. And I recognized leadership on his life. So eventually we made him the children's church pastor. Then we made him the youth pastor. And then he was one of my church planters, and now he's the state president. How could he move through all those different areas? Because he is a leader. And so he can lead this, he can lead that, etc., and so on. So we need to understand that about the type of people we're working with. So how do we recognize leaders? Because in this context, we're talking about recognition and release. Well, through observation. we observe them. Some people, if I said to you, the next session, if I said to some people, next session, you're going to take that, some people would go into, anxiety attack. They'd immediately rush to the toilet because, they're, oh my goodness, they're feeling sick. Others would go, yeah, finally, my chance. All right? So those sort of people can initially appear, as I said earlier, a bit arrogant, but actually something's going on there. Why did that person behave differently to the others? And the trap we could have is we misinterpret this emerging leadership gift as somebody we've got to slap around and sort out, when actually the reason why they're saying, yeah, but why don't we try? And I thought about that. And have you ever thought? And you're going, would you shut up? When really there's a reason why they're talking like that. And we've got to go, hey, something's going on here. I used to say to the rising leaders around me, that's great idea, but not while I'm here, okay? I want you to get a notebook and start writing those things down. And when I plant you out, you can try all those ideas. Yeah, that's what I'd say to them. What? Because otherwise they're just dumping all their ideas, onto me in that. So through observation, give them small organizational tasks, see how they cope with that. And of course, there's leadership capacities, leaders over 50, 100, etc. And really what that's talking about is their ability to deal with multiple levels of complexity. I mean, they have lots of spinning plates happening, and they're just fine with that. And then you get that one extra plate, and they've hit their max, all right? But that's another thing to observe. Can they deal with multiple levels of complexity? As I said, somebody's developing a leadership gift or has a leadership, but it's developing, can be misunderstood. They can appear bossy, opinionated, but they're just really wanting to explore a better way of doing things. I mean, we've all observed kids in the playground and the kid that's organising the game. Let's make it that I blah, 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 and you guys, and they're, reinventing the rules of the game. That's a leader right there in the playground. It's just in them coming out. Now, here's the thing. Once you get a leader, be smart. It's a developing leader. You pull them aside. You start spending a bit of time. I still run a discipleship class that runs for a whole 12 months, one night a week. I'd spend with them. They were like my life group. They were like my cell group. These were all the rough diamonds that I'd recognize, Pastor Mark, all the other names that you may be familiar. They were once in my discipleship group. And I spent time with them, talking with them, and inputting into their life in that way. So just taking them aside. And then, a big church is an illusion. Did you know that? It's an illusion. It's actually multiple sub-congregations all coming together at one time. And everybody goes, whoa, but there's the children, there's the teens, there's the young adults, there's the families, and there's the seniors. And they're all sub-congregations. And if you put a leader over each one of those areas, stand back and watch what they do. They just do it. They just know how to lead that. And so you're reaping the benefit, and they're also cutting their teeth, so to speak, on managing a budget and and organisation, and watching them with organisational skills, etc. Is that cool? All right, so that's a great key that I certainly had to learn and release. All right, now I want to sort of move into maybe speaking to you guys personally into a now moment in this state. Is that okay? So we're sort of changing gears a little bit now to realize that you could be in the cusp, even what I've already heard this morning, of a significant shift moment. And I want to take you to Luke chapter 22, where Jesus is I smile when I read this because it must have been such a head spin moment for the disciples. He gets them together and he says, when I sent you without purse, bag, sandals, did you lack anything? And they said, nothing. And then he said to them, but now, if you have a purse, take it. Also a bag. And listen, if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one. Can you imagine what this moment must have been like for them? So we're doing it like this, and now you're saying, don't do it like that, do it like this. It's like, so what I want to talk to you now is the significance of realizing that you're in a but now moment. That you have a Jesus who's capable of saying to you, thank you very much. I told you to do it like that, and you did it, but thank you very much. But now, I want you to do it like this. Wow. Not everybody can work with a but now Jesus. Funny story. I was in Cambodia teaching this and taught about this but now and working with Jesus in the but now. And the pastor got up to close the meeting and he wanted to demonstrate to me that he's got a grasp of English. So he's, it's his second language. And so he begins his prayer by saying, Jesus, thank you that we're in your but now. We are in your but now. And we are just going deep into this but now moment. And it's like, well, okay, this is not working in English. Pressing into the but now and going deep into the but now. And thank you that we're in your but now. And it's like, well, okay. But of course, nobody laughed because this was how it translated. All right. So if you can get out of that visualization, actually what was happening in a historical context was Jesus was getting them ready to go to the Gentiles. They had enjoyed hospitality in the Jewish villages. They ain't going to get that in the Gentile ones. So he's saying, that was great, but now I'm getting you ready to go to the Gentiles, and you better take some money. You better take your sword. So in a historical context, but what I want to look at is that we have this Jesus that's capable of saying to us, but now I want you to do this. And if we can't move with that, if we hold on to what's worked for us as in the past, as if it was and it was a divine revelation, but it's but now. Here's the thing, God doesn't sweep aside the past, he builds on it. So what he was really saying is, because you did that, it's the next row of bricks. Because you did and you were faithful to do that, now we can build and place on this the next row of bricks that is this new expression of what God wants to bring to you. Years ago, I traveled with this MacBook Air, and it's great and all that. And my kids bought for me an iPad, and I plugged in my iPad, and my MacBook did not even register that I'd plugged it in. It was just like it didn't exist. And so I called my my son-in-law over, and he's looking at it. He said, when was the last time you updated the software on your computer? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, I think that's the problem. He said, occasionally doesn't the thing come up, do you want to update now or do you want to ignore? What do you do when that happens? I said, well, I'm always busy, so I hit ignore. And he said, well, that's your problem. The technology is different. This iPad is the latest iPad, and your computer doesn't recognize it. And so by not updating your software, it can't recognize this new thing. It can't recognize it. So how many times do we hit ignore? God's trying to bring a but now moment to us, and we're so busy I'll deal with that later. We're not going, yeah, okay, this is something that I need to recognize as what God is now doing. So we can get stuck with saying, well, this is how it was, and etc. and so on. So often, what I'm struggling with is not, this isn't God, but it's not my preference. Please, leaders, understand there's a difference between your preferences and the principles of God. If you don't like the music, please don't tell us it's God telling you that. You're 60 years old, for crying out loud. That's your problem. Yeah, of course it is. I don't like Pink. I just feel. No, don't say feel. You don't like Pink. And that is no reason for you to go squash, we're not doing that, etc. and so on. Man, I walk into our youth meetings, I think, far out. Is there something wrong with your hearing? If there's not, there will be soon. I mean, what the heck? But do I go, whoa, have a great time. 5 minutes I'm in the auditorium, I leave. All right, so you go for it. But that's because of, well, that's serious. But I'm not trying to come this, whoa, this is so not God thing. It's a but now, and I'm going with it. And so I'm just saying we can't be these people that can't recognize, wow, that was great, but now this is what actually God's saying and doing. Last thing, and then how am I going for time? Whoa, okay. Last thing I wanted to leave you with that I felt would be helpful is please understand that you're doing ministry in a tension. By tension, I mean think stretch, all right? And that tension is put there by God. Stop praying and thinking that you want to pray the tension away, because you aren't going to get stretched or grow if there's not that tension there. John the Baptist, we read, even though he was the first to announce Jesus, he's in prison now on death row, and he's sending some of his disciples to ask Jesus, are you the one that's coming, or should we look for someone else? Poor old John the Baptist, he's thrown out of balance because things aren't working out the way that he thought they would. And it threw him. This is not the picture that he had in his head, because he's dealing with a tension between Jesus doing great things, but I'm in prison. And this is a tension that he was in. I love the honesty of Paul in 1 Corinthians 16. He says, I will stay on at Ephesus until Pentecost, because a great door for effective work has opened to me. And here comes the tension. And there's many who oppose me. Wow. Can you hear the tension? Some of us are thinking, if there's a great door, there should be no opposing. But there's a tension there. And in this tension, we grow, we're stretched. It's actually ordained by God for us to be living in this tension. Stop trying to pray the tension away and learn to do ministry in it. Learn to do ministry in the tension. Hebrews 5, although Jesus was the Son of God, he learned to be obedient by attending all the pastoral gatherings. No, he learned obedience by going to seminars and reading books. No, he learned obedience through the things that he suffered. Now, if it's good enough for Jesus, where on earth do we get off thinking, it's amazing the number one of us who want to be an overcomer, but we don't want anything to overcome. We want to die and go to a great reward, but what do you want to be rewarded for? You kept dodging every issue. What are you going to get rewarded for? So come on. Opportunities and opposition, possibilities and problems, favor and failure. Stop reading that as there's something wrong. Welcome to the planet. Welcome to the planet. This is just, stop shaking your fist at all these things and realize what this is doing here is I need to learn to do life in this tension. See, I'd be waiting for this other tension of crapola to go away. Because people would come and say, wow, God's doing great things in your church. And I'd be withholding my praise because I'm thinking, if you really knew that Mrs. Kafups has spit the dummy and Billy Bloggs is, blah, 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 then you wouldn't say that. I was aware of this other tension, see? So I wasn't going, yay, God. I was waiting for the other tension to go away before I was going to go, yay, God. Guess what? I'm still waiting. And what I need to learn was I need to do life in this tension. And that's why God strategically brings dipstick people into your life. They are strategically designed by God to get right down inside you and reveal how much black stuff there is in there. The dipstick people don't create it, they reveal it. Just when you think, yeah, I think I'm there, yeah, along comes that dipstick person and they can find the stuff that's still there. Now, I used to pray the dipstick people away, but no sooner had they left than a new one would be coming in. So it's better the dipstick you know than the dipstick you don't know. So I'd stop praying. I said, look, you're my dipstick. I know you. I know your mannerisms. I see you walking towards me after I preach. I know you're going to lecture me again about this and that. So at least I know my dipsticks, all right? Because, they're there to help us grow. God is providing this tension. So here's how I'm going to finish up, and then we're just going to create a moment, a space for God to speak to us. How are we meant to do life in this tension? If this is ordained by God, if God himself, even in nature we see the butterflies struggling to get out of the cocoon. If we helped it, we'd ruin it. And God's saying to some of you, stop rescuing people. Let them struggle. They have got to struggle. All right? Now, I don't mean in a malicious sense, of course, but if we keep rescuing people, that same principle applies. That butterfly is getting the strength to fly from the struggle. And also, if you helped it, its wings would be deformed. The squeeze is actually ironing out all the wrinkles out of their wings. So if you keep rushing in to rescue, you're actually aborting something that God has ordained. And you watch, if you rescue, another thing will occur, come back at them. Better to let them go through it and emerge and get through it rather than them, because of your good intentions, you're aborting the process of God. How are we meant to live? And this is what I want to leave you with. It says in Psalm 121, lift up your eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord. Psalm 123, lift up your eyes to, I lift my eyes to you who on the throne. So this whole idea of living in the tension, but not obsessing on the crapola tension, lifting up our eyes, stop being in awe at this tension. Don't focus on it. Don't obsess on it. God tells us you're in this tension. I've created it to stretch you and grow because you're here not for your happiness or your misery. You're here to grow up. We are here in this stage of our existence to get maturity. We can't get it any other way than actually being in a tension. So God's saying, come on, lift up your eyes, learn to do don't be in awe of this. Don't be thrown like John the Baptist off balance by it, starting to question, really, is this? Don't do that. Lift up your eyes. This is figurative language for God saying, shift your focus. Listen, a word for people here, stop looking where you don't want to go. Stop looking where you don't want to go. Would you stop that? Lift up your eyes. Oh yeah, but did you hear about, and then that happened. No, we're not looking at that. We're lifting up our eyes. Whatever has your attention has you. And so, listen, stop obsessing on what isn't. Big deal. You can tell us what isn't. No prize for you. We want to know, wow. When we lift up our eyes, what do we see God doing? What do we see the potential that God's bringing to us? Stop feeding off inferior things. If you're going through a wilderness, guess what? There's a cloud of God's presence hovering over you. Every day that they walked through that wilderness, there was a cloud. Lift up your eyes. Look at the cloud. You're in a wilderness? Yeah, but there's a cloud there. You're in chaos right now. Guess what? Hovering over your chaos is the Spirit of the Lord. Lift up your eyes. Be aware. Wow. I'm drawing on that. Why don't we just stand to our feet? Maybe we can get the team to come back and help us with just an atmosphere of worship as we just shift our awareness into what God is saying and doing, what God is stirring. Let's corporately in this room lift up our eyes. We're all aware of the other parallel. We're aware of the stuff going on, and the enemy would love to distract us and throw us into doubt, throw us off balance. And he has a way of just cranking up the volume in that, trying to get us distracted. But we set our hand to the plow and we set our face like flint, so to speak, and onward we go in Jesus' mighty name. So right now, Lord, I thank you for the calling and the grace that's in this room, that's ordained by God, that Jesus Christ has distributed. People in this room who think, you know what, you drift into a bit of a daydream and you see yourself ministering in a certain way, and God says, stop calling it a daydream. That's me. I'm showing you stuff. It's not you making it up. It's me. That's why it just keeps coming back to you. You're seeing yourself ministering, and things are happening when you minister and pray for people. You see yourself preaching a certain way. Hold on. That's you lifting up your eyes. That's the hope, the expectation. That's you drawing something down from the spirit realm into this realm, heaven coming to earth. In this tangible way, we're drawing it down in the mighty name of Jesus. Thanks, team. You just take us away with something there. And right now, this is a great way for us to sort of come to the end of our time together, is to be looking to our vine. And I tell you what, I want you to be aware of the life-giving sap of the Spirit of God coming into you right now. And I want to say it again. It's the vine's responsibility to bring to the branch everything it needs. Come on, get confident in your vine. Get confident that if that dream in your heart has been given to you by the vine, Christ Jesus, then He's also going to provide all the money and the means and the people and all the issues. Let faith rise in this room. Faith rise in this room. We lift up our eyes. Where does our help come from? It comes from the Lord.